Hey everyone, welcome to Extreme Python. My name is Gil and I'm going to be with you for a very short time about Playwright, which is not a lot of time, so we need to start talking about it. Usually I give something like at least an hour for this, but hopefully a whole day. But this is going to be very short, so I'm not going to show you everything. I'm going to show you the tip of things that you can actually do with it, what it is, and why you should actually try it. Before we start, my name is Gil. I'm a trainer and consultant. I'm based in Israel, and I do all kinds of things to work with developers and testers who want to make software better. So that's what we do. You can go to my site, testinggil.com. You can go to my YouTube channel, do a lot of videos about all kinds of things, including Playwright. So if you want to learn a bit more than the condensed version, you go there. Author of 2 books, that's basically it. Let's start. So what is Playwright? Playwright started out as really as another project called Puppeteer in Google. Somehow something involving money. Microsoft got the people who worked on Puppeteer and brought them to Microsoft. Puppeteer was supposed to be an automation tool, a better automation tool for browsers, and they did a very good job apparently. Microsoft brought them and they decided to use this knowledge to build a whole test automation framework. Now this was in JavaScript, and today it works with all languages, including Python, which I'm going to see today. What is important though, it works for web testing, and that's the basic of this. Okay, one more thing. We think about web automation or web automation testing as something that is in the jurisdiction of testers. It is. And unfortunately, I think it should be like everybody's responsibility. And if you're web developers or whatever developing something, as you'll see, it's good to know Playwright as a test framework, but also add that as a useful tool in your tool belt in order to support testing other facets of your system through the web UI. You'll see. Now, let's talk about how we get Playwright working. So I'll show you in a minute what you need in order to run Playwright, but the documentation is very good and it's very easy to install. Basically a couple of packages. What is important to understand that Playwright in Python works with PyTest. So it takes all the abilities to identify tests, run tests from PyTest. It also takes a lot of the intricacies of what PyTest calls fixtures and use it very well. If you don't know about PyTest, learn. Fixtures is a bit more advanced, but it is also interesting to learn for PyTest by itself, but also important for Playwright. So how is it working? Basically what we have is a test framework. In our case it's going to be PyTest, which runs something that you don't see on the screen, which is Playwright. And Playwright loads a driver for the browser. So when you install Playwright, it will tell you, please install the drivers for Chrome, WebKit, whatever. And once you do that, it basically almost automatically will check if you have on your computer or whatever, wherever you're running, the current version of the browser. And if it does, it will run. How does it run? Well, the driver talks to a browser. It loads an anonymous browser, incognito browser, and the browser does whatever it's being told to do. Navigate, load pages. The pages are made of JavaScript, obviously, and HTML, regardless of how it was written. So if the site was written with React or something else, you don't care about that. And Playwright doesn't care about that either. And whatever is running behind on the back end, again, it doesn't matter. It does a bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the driver talks to the browser and tells it, find things on the screen, click them, fill them in, stuff like that. If you've worked with web automation frameworks before, like Selenium, the idea is very similar. There are a couple of upgrades, including speed. So let's look how this thing is working. I'm going to switch to my PyCharm, which also has browser running there, and my application is running on a local machine. So this is running on my local host. It's a small registration application, so you have 3 text boxes that you need to fill. I have a couple of check boxes. If you check this box, this is enabled. uncheck it. It's not. If you try to register with any of these things empty, you get a nice error here. And when you type things in like this, it saves the data and navigates to a page, which is a thank you page. That's basically it. Let's look at the tests. Okay, so first let's take a look at the requirements. We're talking about the basic is having PyTest in Playwright and PyTest Playwright, which is sort of a bridge between the two, so you can actually write tests with Playwright as PyTest. Now let's take a look at the tests. So Playwright comes with a couple of flavors. Sync API and async API. It comes from JavaScript, where you have await async for everything. So this is, if you use the async API, it will look like await, lots of await and async with it. But in order to make it a little bit more readable, there's another flavor called sync API, which has the page and stuff with it. So you can see that it uses the PyTest notation of having everything starting with test, including the test files, and it injects into the test the page fixture. Page is whatever we need in order to control or query the current page. So if we do a navigation, like in my application, page will point at the current page. So it comes with page.goto, which navigates to wherever I want it to go. Get by text, get by roles. We'll talk about that in a second. Finding stuff with locators, and expects to ask whether expects is the title visible or not. Basically, this is the first test that the registration page opens correctly. The second goes to the entire section, the entire thing that I showed you. Navigate, find all the locators on, check the checkboxes, fill in the text boxes, click on the button, and then when this happens, there's a navigation happening, and then page points at the thank you page, gets the thank you Gil, and expect the thank you message to be visible. Doesn't look too frightening, I know. Excellent, that's what it's supposed to be. It's very easy to understand what's going on here. Okay, so let's talk about locators. You've already seen a couple, and you've seen that there are different ways to find them, like get by text and get by role. Usually you're supposed to find things by role. These are like accessibility roles. A button doesn't have to be implemented as a button, HTML button, but it still acts as a button, so the way the user sees it. It's interesting though that the locators themselves are a bit smart. So let's talk about this when we talk about dynamics. You remember the error that I showed you is a dynamic thing, when it only appears there when I do something weird, trying to press the button where everything is not filled, so it shows the error. When I click on the text fields, the error disappears. Okay, so this is the name. So how does this work? So let's look at a test. Let's switch to the code. Okay, so this test shows a test that the error is being displayed when one of the fields is empty, and then if it's cleared, it's there. So basically, it looks like the old test, right? And we navigate, we find the locators, check the checkbox, click the button, and then check that the error message is visible. So as we read it, it makes complete sense until we ask, well, how did this get here when it was found here before we actually press the button? It's a dynamic thing. So the way locators work is that you basically tell the page, well, go find them. But when you actually need to use them, need to do something about them, like expect or check or click or whatever, then you go look for them. Now, if you're familiar with Selenium, Selenium worked with something that resulted with what we call stale elements. And that means that if you found a locator or an element in Selenium speak, and you would hold it with your hands, at some point it will not point at anything because the screens change, the DOM changes, and what you hold in your hand is not viable. One of the things that Playwright does excellently is does away with that. So whenever you use something, then I'm going to look for it. If I find it, excellent, I can do something with it. If I don't, basically what I did was start a timer. So what you'll get is an error. I couldn't find it within a timeout. Makes sense. It's a bit weird, but you have to get used to the errors, like when they have a flavor of a timeout rather than something else. But this is how it works. Okay, switch back to the slides. Okay, so one of the things that it does well is a philosophy. Like it has a lot of things that the Playwright philosophy works very well. For example, if you run the test, which I didn't, in front of you, you won't see anything, because the default is to run it as a headless mode. You don't see anything. It runs invisible. It runs faster. So the thinking is that we're going to run a lot of tests, run them quickly. The other thing is the philosophy that this is not just a web automation tool, it is something of a system automation tool and for testing. And for that, we need something extra. So for example, for the application that I showed you, what you see is, and what you automate is on the screen. Like I entered my name and things and details, press click, show the thank you Gil. But is the application really working? Was the data saved? Well, in regular applications, what you'll have is APIs that will let you read the data and check for that. So if you're working like in a regular test framework, you'll need something like request or other packages to help you with accessing this data. And because of the philosophy of Playwright says, I'm going to help you with everything, it gives us API support as well. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so what I did here is something that I always do, which is something that you probably want to do. I extracted everything for something that is more readable. So everything get by role, stuff like that. Get button makes the test more readable. And I'll talk about that in a second. But you probably want to do that. And this takes the whole registration process. And you'll see this is again completely the same as we had until before, since before. But here you can see that I'm using Playwright, which is injected here as a fixture as well, and I'm using playwright.request.newContext.get, and here I can get like get, put, head, post, whatever I want, patch. So it's a wrapper. Playwright looks as each test runs in isolation. It runs in a context and a browser. So everything, including the request, is now kind of associated with this test, which is kind of cool. And after I do the get, I get the response and do some things with them, check that the actual last entry was what I actually entered here. And I have a full system, like it also automates the UI, but also allows me to call APIs. Obviously, the API is something that the system needs to have in order to call it. Okay, first thing I want to show you today, before I talk about something that I don't show you, is grouping. So you've seen that tests are like floating. If you worked with tests before, you probably know that you probably want to have something that runs before each, after each, stuff like that, which usually is being done in PyTest by fixture. If you worked with unit test, for example, the regular unit test framework of Python, you have something similar to that. How does this work with PyTest? So let's look. So usually what we will have is you define a fixture and you share things within this fixture. So a fixture really is a container for something that's running before and after our test. That's like a fixture really is something that looks like this, something before, something after. And what you need to do is basically create something that you share. Our locator is going to be shared. They're variables. Although they're not, remember, the values of the locators are not really interesting because they're going to be calculated the minute I use them. But the variable declaration can be done once. And then in the fixture itself, I define what I want to happen before the test, call yield, which executes the test, and whatever happens here, which is today nothing, can run after the test. So basically what I do here is do the navigation and find the locators, or I tell Playwright how to find the locators, and then for each test, it will run this before that. So the tests become a lot more shorter, readable, and they do the same thing. Cool thing about fixtures, by the way, not Playwright related, PyTest related, is that you can apply them across modules. or test modules, which is kind of interesting and also get complicated. So you can write a lot more readable tests with using the fixtures. Okay, before we get to the verdict, I want to talk about one thing that I haven't showed you. It is something that comes with Playwright, which is called a code generator. Code generator, or test generator, is exactly what it sounds like. You get a browser, you click on things, you have code generated for you. The problem is, it takes a bit more time than I have to show you. This is what I'm not showing you today. But the code that it generates works, but it requires a lot of refactoring. So it's not exactly how you would actually find locators or how you would write it. And if you're actually going to work with that, which is a time saver, I recommend actually playing with that. Look at the code that it generates. You probably wouldn't like it as is, which gets me to the verdict really. It connects really to that. Playwright is a very good starting point in terms of if you're going to first run or write tests for automation, very good starting point to have. If you do it by yourself, you've already seen the APIs are very clear. You'll do a lot of copying and pasting, which you probably want to refactor, but it's very simple to understand, get hold of, maintain as well. If you're using the code generator, it will create code that will not look like the code that I showed you. It's going to be uglier. You probably want to invest in that. Should you use it? Now, two things that you need to ask yourself. First of all, is it your first test framework? If it is, you're going to start working with web automation, yes, this should be your first test framework. It's better than others. It's newer, although because it's been around only from 2020, but it already has a lot of users, good documentation, good support, backing for Microsoft, which is a good and a bad thing, because at one point Microsoft may decide, we've had enough with it, let's throw it away. We've seen things like that happen, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen soon. So having a backing of Microsoft is something very good. If you're already invested, like you have a ton of Selenium tests or other frameworks or whatever you're using, should you switch over? Well, my answer is like, first of all, try it. Get to know it, see how it works for you. If you like it, then you don't need to switch over all the tests. You can run them sort of side by side, and you can start adding your tests to your new tests with Playwright, which I really recommend. So try it, at least try it. It's very cool, very easy to install, to understand, and I think you'll like it. So if you have questions, we have a few minutes for Q&A. If not, find me over the internet on different social networks that you may or may not find. Watch videos I do on YouTube. I do monthly webinars, including things on Playwright. And if you have any question about this or other things that I do, go ahead, ask me, you'll find me. Thank you very much.